Okay guys, so today I have a new White Forest deck profile for you. This is going to be the Fiendsmith version of the White Forest Azamina toy deck from Supreme Darkness. The Fiendsmith version was the most requested version in my last video, so if you want to see the toy version of White Forest Azamina without the Fiendsmith cards, then look at my last video. Okay, in this video, I want to go over the ratios I've chosen, why I'm playing this Fiendsmith package. I'll talk about the game plan, show you some sample combos, and then some actual gameplay. If you're new to the channel, I cover mostly White Forest, but also just Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck theory, deck building, ratios, and that type of stuff. So if you're interested in that, feel free to subscribe or join the Discord, or don't. Okay, so first of all, a note on the ratios here. The reason that I've chosen this package is that you have a few different options for the Fiendsmith things. If you play a single engraver and nothing else in the main, then your access to the Fiendsmith stuff is through Closed Heaven, which is fine, but in a meta where they're going to be maybe hand traps and also board breakers, being able to start by drawing an engraver or a Sanct and going straight into, for example, a Wave Hiking Caesar, or potentially like a Desiree, when Nib is going to be played because of Malice and also even because of Ryziel, because people pair Nib with other hand traps now, is solid. You want to be able to do that before you commit to the rest of your engine, which is somewhat fragile if you don't have other types of gas that are mutually exclusive and can work on their own. So I think that actually trying to draw these cards is better than just going through Closed Heaven, and I don't know if I think it would be worth it if you didn't play a larger package. However, the Fiendsmith cards are usually an upgrade to most decks, so if you want to play with only one engraver or you can only afford one engraver, then it's still a fine option. Okay, I've seen some discussion in the Discord about Azamina LZ and if you should play 1, 2, or 3, and whether playing stuff like the Wanted engine means you should play less of these because it's searchable. I think that this is almost the best card in the entire deck now, and it's the thing that makes you play through interactions the most. For example, if you normal summon a Sylvie and you get Impermanent or Veilered, it doesn't really matter because you can still special summon this card and continue playing. If you have access to a Rusia, for example, you still don't have to use your normal because you can special Azamina LZ, Rusia can special itself, and then you have access to the classic White Forest ladder without having committed your normal summon. That also means that a Stellar is a lot less important in this build. The only reason that I'm still including it is because I'm on the toy cards. I am playing one Stellar and one Witch because they're both searchable, and the Stellar is something that I prefer to send to the grave with a Witch and then bring it back from the grave after triggering it if I've used something like an Arciela to send a spell or trap to the graveyard. But I think this is a lot less value right now, and you could maybe even play the deck without it at all. Because this is intentionally a toy version of the deck, I'm playing the largest toy engine possible, but with just one tank. This does add some variance to the deck in the sense that if you draw these cards, obviously you have a lot more gas, but none of these cards are bricks, so it's not a problem that there's more variance in your deck. That said, if you weren't playing these cards, you would have more space for non-engine and maybe even a slightly larger Fiendsmith engine with an additional Sanct, or a second Rusia, or another Stellar. Witch is obviously the worst card of the Wanted engine, and so I'm playing 3 Wanted and 1 Witch. Also, if you're playing an actual Fiendsmith package, it's hard to stick closer to 40, so cutting down on Witch is important. You can't afford to play 2 little non-engine cards in the current format because you'll just lose to stuff like Detonator if you don't have a solid out to it like a Talents or a Droplet or a Goat. Okay, last thing is that the Hallowed is now the only true brick that you don't want to see either side of the dice roll. It does unbrick itself, I guess, if you've hard drawn a Wanted, or if you search a Wanted, you're kind of unbricking the Hallowed, but you don't actually ever want to draw this, you always want to search it. The Unleashing is a brick going second because it's not gas. Deception is suboptimal depending on if you're playing into a Detonator or not. And the Lacrima is not as bad of a brick as a single engraver would be, so it's just fine. It's very important that you play both the Wave Hiking Caesar and the Desiree. I'll show you that in a minute, because hard drawing an engraver, for example, means you have access to both the Wave Hiking Caesar and the Desiree, and there's no reason not to do that. Your extra deck space is quite tight if you do play both of these, so it's kind of limited what you can play here. I'm not going to go too much into other options for now, but I do have another video coming out with Dominus Purge and more hand traps, and then some like ways to not play darks in the deck so that that's live. Okay, so now let me show you some of the sample lines, and then I'll show you some actual gameplay. First of all, what happens if you draw Engraver, because this is a Fiendsmith version after all. So if you draw the Engraver, you will search for the Sanct, because we're not playing Tract and Lurie because we don't want to play bricks. Also, this plays into draw less hard. So here you can go for you can go for the Wave Hiking Caesar. Now, if you make the Wave Hiking Caesar here, then the engraver is stuck underneath. So it's important that you had drawn the engraver. This is one of the reasons why you would want to draw it. Not just that you want to get these things on board before you commit your White Forest stuff, but you actually want these extra bodies for making a Desiree later in the turn. So now that you have a Wave Hiking Caesar on field and you have nib checked, you now can go into your White Forest engine. So here I'm just going to do whatever type of play. I search for the tails off the Sylvie. Oh, one thing that's important to note here is that I talk a lot about functional redundancy in the White Forest engines, so that, you know, your Sylvie can search for a lot of the things that an Arciela can search for, or that a Murcielago can search for. Like, these can all search Azamina Unleashing. But the thing is that the Arciela is the only card that can search for a Veiler. So if your opponent is on breakers, or you read that they don't have hand traps, then it's actually kind of a bad idea to just search for things with Arciela that like a Sylvie could have gotten you instead. And so you actually want to search for Veiler a lot of the time, specifically with this card, because you can get the other stuff off of your Sylvie and your Murcielago. Okay, so here we go for the Diabellze. We add the Wanted. We wanted to search for the Witch. And this is all without the toy engine because we haven't drawn it here. I'm just showing the Fiendsmith stuff right now. Here we have the Deception now, and we can tails search for a Rusia, for example. We get access to Hallowed, and that brings out a Murcielago. Now, obviously you can go straight into Ilia Sylvia, but if you think that your opponent isn't on something that can stop you, or if they have Nib Veiler that's beating the Ilia Sylvia here anyhow, here we search for another Wanted despite having gone through it, because we want to add back the Hallowed Azamina. Always remember that unlike in previous combos where you shuffle back the Murcielago and you always want it to be in your grave so you're not losing a body off your board to get back Hallowed Azamina, because you will almost always have Azamina Elzette in your grave, you don't need to make sure that the Murcielago is in the grave before you add the Hallowed back to hand. So this makes it a lot easier to play around, you know, the add back effect here. So here we send the Wanted that we searched to have another material for the Ilia Sylvia, and now I can Rusia to go into the Closed Heaven here. So we have the Wave Hiking Caesar and the Ilia Sylvia, and now because we'd hard drawn the Engraver, and then we had another Light Fiend engrave, despite being having our other Engraver locked under here, we can give ourselves the third Light Fiend, shuffle back our Ciela, bring out Rusia, go for Sequence, and then Sequence bring out the Desiree. Now here, in a lot of cases, you're just going to Sequence equip to the Desiree. But I guess it is worth mentioning that, you know, technically if you had another body on field, you could like hyperextend and turn this into like a Rabbit or a Little Knight or whatever your placeholder link to is. So the Wave Hiking Caesar and the Desiree are part of your basic end board with the Ilia Sylvia and the Diabellze. Ideally, you've also searched for Unleashing, which should be a core piece of your end board, and then you have Follow Up in the grave. Okay, what happens if you've drawn Sanct instead of Engraver? So Sanct is a worse draw, aside from the fact that you won't get drolled if you Sanct, but you can get drolled if you Engraver. You also can get drolled if you if you Tracked, so I guess this is slightly better than Tracked in the sense that it plays around droll a little bit more. So here we make the token, which is not a body because it disappears. We go for the Requiem, we bring out the Lacrima, which dumps an Engraver. Here we remember, don't look stupid, guys. You will summon the Necroquip before you summon out the Engraver. So now that Necroquip had the bodies to be summoned, the Engraver can shuffle back whatever. In this case, we put back the Requiem and we have the Lacrima engrave. So at this point, this is very important. Here is the nib check. Okay, so if they don't nib you, you're going to make Wave Hiking Caesar. If they do nib you, because Necroquip is a Dark Fiend, you will have Engraver and one Light Fiend engrave, which means you can very easily make Closed Heaven later on in your own combo to give yourself the third Light Fiend, so that you can still make a Desiree even after getting nibbed trying to go into Wave Hiking Caesar. But if they don't nib you, you make the Wave Hiking. Here's a classic example of Azamina Elzette brings itself out, so Rusia can special itself. Here we send the Azamina Unleashing to the grave. It resets itself when we've drawn a Wanted. Now, the cool thing about whether you hard draw or search the Esteller is that because you can get access to Witch whenever you want, the Witch usually pitches the Esteller, so that by the time you go into your Arciela, you can trigger the Esteller in the grave because a Speller Trap was sent. The Esteller comes out, and then you ladder into your Diabellze as normal, and then of course we're keeping the Unleashing in rotation. We have searched for the Veiler, so we have like a pretty strong setup already, where the Veiler is a hand interaction, the Unleashing is a spell trap zone interaction, and then our monsters are the monster zone interactions. So here we go for the Murcielago. We search for an Azamina Elzette because we already have Unleashing. We add back here, so now we can bring out the Ilia Sylvia, and then the Russia brings itself out, and now we can choose what it is that we're going into. This is our placeholder link 2. It could be Rabbit, which I don't play, at least not in the main, because I don't want to add more bricks with Azrune or Silhouette Trick. Or you could do the cheese, where you side in Swamp Mirror off the Silhouette Rabbit, so that if you've drawn Thrust, you get hand trapped, you thrust set Harpy's Featherstorm, the Rabbit brings out the Swamp Mirror, which can turn itself into a Winged Beast, so that you can Featherstorm them on your opponent's turn. So they're just options for the Link 2 here. Okay, so last thing I want to show you is another siding pattern trick, where let's say you just go for whatever, it doesn't matter, you're just doing like whatever your combo is, so you go for your Unleashing, which you always want. You don't want to look stupid and lose to like 1 Imperm or a Dark Ruler or whatever, and you search for Sinful Spoils Subdual. So this card takes a level 5 or higher illusion monster, so unfortunately, because it's level 5 or higher, you can't search Azamina LZ, but that's not the point of this. You can either add it to your hand or special summon it, but if you special summon it with this effect, you cannot activate its effects during the main phase this turn. The other effect I think is not super relevant unless you or your opponent are playing Book of Eclipse, or you are playing into the Mirror and you get Silverid. But you can banish it from your grave, target a face down card you control, return it to the hand, and then you can set a spell and trap from your hand. I guess you could also, if you Deception set itself in the end phase, it would be face down, and you could, you know, save your Deception from being destroyed by your opponent or something, but I think this is more of a niche effect. Really, you're just going to search Diabellze with this. So now your opponent does whatever, you activate Subdual, and you bring out Diabellze, the original Sin Keeper. Okay, so a couple things about this. First of all, the main effect is your opponent must set spell or trap cards before activating them. So this was the Floodgate that would destroy Tenpai and Runic, for example. I'm not saying this is the best card you've ever seen in your life. It is a very niche Floodgate, but it's extremely strong against the things that lose to it. The only thing that you're locked out of with Subdual is you can't use its other effect, where if a spell/trap becomes set on the field while this is in the monster zone, this is a trigger effect, you can target a card you control and a card your opponent controls, destroy them. So this stops you using the effect during the main phase of the turn that this was summoned, and so you can't do that, but it's still, you know, like a Floodgate if you were siding in against something that's a Floodgate against. The other thing is that if a Sinful Spoils card is in either player's graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand. So if you've hard drawn this, even though it's not gas and it's an engine requirement, it's a very soft brick, because you could either draw the Wanted, or you could search it off of the million cards that search the Wanted, and you can just special this from your hand, and then it's a body for example, a Closed Heaven, or just something you leave on the field because you sided it in because you thought it was good. Okay, so yeah, that's basically that. Now I'll show you some actual gameplay quickly. I'll show you one where I go first and one where I go second. So the first one is some kind of White Forest Azamina Chimera deck, which I've been thinking about playing, but I haven't tested it yet, so I don't know how good it is. So here we go for the Wave Hiking. I special Azamina LZ, which allows me to special Russia, so no normal summon has been committed so far. I send the tails for a draw. I draw into the Esteller. I still have Goat in hand. So now the Arciela searches the Veiler. Remember that we always want to search the Veiler off Arciela if our opponent is not interacting with us, because we can get basically any other card off of any other card. Now we wanted for the Witch. We can Witch pitch the Esteller, set the Deception. We can Deception, get our Hallowed, and this can give us, for example, a Murcielago, which can give us the Unleashing. That's why we didn't need to search it off of like the Arciela. That's why we needed the Veiler, because this can't search Veiler. Now we can get just like a free body here, which can give us our normal summon, for example. Because we've sent something, we can trigger the Estella, bring that back, go into Diabellze. That gives us back Deception. Now we can go for the Closed Heaven, because we hard drew the Engraver. So we have Engraver and one Light Fiend engrave. This is the third Light Fiend. Here we Deception, we bring out the Omni Negate, we Russia come out, that goes into the sequence, and so now we can bring out Desiree, and I think that this is maybe too much of an extension here. You should just hold the Sylvie in your hand as follow-up. Here I'm just really going for everything, and I use the sequence as a body to make Little Knight and then equip it to the Desiree. So the opponent starts with Deception, then activates Kotal. This is not good. You should not be revealing information to your opponent for free. If you're going to start with Deception, use Deception. If you're going to start with Kotal, start with the Kotal. But anyhow, he reveals Deception, Kotal, and Sword Knight now. And then he activates Azamina LZ and then specials a different card, the Sylvie. So he's revealed like 4 cards for no reason instead of just going for 1 line and keeping me in the dark about everything else. Okay, so anyhow, I decided to chain the Little Knight to the Sylvie because if he's on a Chimera deck, it means that he has lots of different ways to Guardian Chimera, and he may have ways to chain block the Guardian Chimera so that I cannot Ilia Sylvia it. So I'm trying to keep my Wave Hiking Caesar in case he has a bunch of different ways to special summon, so I use the Little Knight so that he's kept off Guardian Chimera. He searches Sinful Spells of the White Forest. Here I bounce the Deception off the Unleashing. Because it is a continuous spell, it has to stay on field to resolve. He reactivates it but cannot use the effect again. Normal summons the Sword Knight, activates Sinful Spoils of the White Forest, which confirms that he is in fact going for Guardian Chimera to pop 1, draw 2, and hopefully continue playing. Obviously we Wave Hiking here. He tries to special again, another Wave Hiking, and you obviously always save the Omni for things that you do not need the Omni for. Okay. Last replay is against Fire King Snake Eyes. So this is Supreme Darkness format post-ban list. Here, again, he activates a Wanted, searches Witch to get Deception, and then does something else. Why are you showing me these cards if you are just going to go and do something else? But the reason that I still included this gameplay is because he ends up still making a decent end board because I have no interactions. So here he normal summons Snake Eye Ash, which means the deck is exactly as full power as it was before. Searches the Poplar. Poplar gets the field spell, so Temple can play Snake Eyes, Diabellze, and then for some reason, I don't know why, he sends the Temple. Why do this? It's not like you're going to replace this with another field spell. The reason you keep this on field is that your Flamberge can't be relied on. If your Flamberge is stopped, you need the Temple to push up whatever is in your back row. So this is your insurance policy. You don't get rid of this for no reason. Anyhow, so he continues playing. He gets the Hallowed Azamina in his hand. He finally brings out Ilia Sylvia, which he should have done from the beginning. Brings out Flamberge, Princess, floats the Flamberge, puts Flamberge on field. So we have the Masquerena in the back. He goes into the Rabbit, which sets the Azurune, and then he passes turn. So, despite getting rid of the field spell, which made no sense, he has the Flamberge, which he is going to use immediately in the draw phase to push out the Masquerena. So I have to play around a Masquerena, presumably into a Little Knight, an Omni Negate from the Ilia Sylvia, the Azurune set off the Rabbit, potentially the Rabbit spell or Trap Pop if I play wrong, and then also the Whale with the Princess Engrave. Okay, so there are, I guess, there's only really one way that I can play here. Normally, you have Goat because you can get Goat into the grave immediately and stop them from doing something. For example, like if I had a Witch in hand, I could Witch send the Goat and call like a Little Knight. So even if he chains the Masquerena to go into Little Knight, the Little Knight won't be able to activate because Goat would already have resolved calling Little Knight. Because I know he has Azurune set, I don't want to lead with the Witch and lose that because I won't get any value off the Witch. So here I activate the Hallowed, which threatens an Omni, which is not what I want to do, because the Omni is very poor card economy. The Omni has to tribute itself to go to the grave. I'd probably rather do something like a Sol, which gives a send and stays on field, so he has to respond to it. So here he chooses to respond with Ilia Sylvia. I don't need to chain the Wanted here because the Hallowed is being negated, but I mean, I'm going to do it right after anyhow. So here he chains the Azurune because I will have a Witch in my hand, so obviously I don't want to Witch right now and send the Goat, which is what I would have liked if he didn't do that, so that I could, call the Little Knight or whatever. So here I thrust because Talents is extraordinarily good against this board. So here's the thing. If I activate Talents and he does not respond, I could take the Flamberge, for example. The Flamberge can push back the Whale. He won't have a window to Princess at this point. That takes the Fire off board, so Princess is now no longer live. If I wanted, I could go Battle Phase and kill the Masquerena, which means that he has to Masquerena and make a Little Knight, and then he doesn't have anything to banish because it's his own Flamberge. So he would just have a Little Knight with the second effect on field, having lost, almost all of his interactions. So he actually has to respond to this. So here he chains the Masquerena. He makes the Little Knight. Now, in case you don't know this, I am the one that gets to use Little Knight's trigger effect. So the trigger window does not happen until the chain resolves. So I Talents to take. I take the Little Knight. Now that I control the Little Knight, then trigger window is now met. I can choose the Little Knight. And so I Little Knight. And I think I target the whale here. I don't know if this is correct per se, but I don't think that it really mattered because I couldn't keep him off princess since he was floating the Flamberge. So I banished the whale and I Little Knight to get rid of the statue, which means that I can finally use the witch. Funnily enough, I don't actually need the goat now, but still there's nothing better to get rid of. He chooses to princess here on the witch. Obviously you cannot goat the princess because that's a grave effect, and this stops the on-field effects. Okay, so I still will set off the witch. I can activate my deception, it's already known. I normal summon the Sylvie, now assuming that he has no interactions left, because this is the deception, and then he has the subdual in hand, something else that he searched, and I can't remember if the last card is known or not. Okay, so here you'll see the strength of a single Sylvie in this deck now, where normal summon Sylvie, search Tails, activate Tails, summon or get LZ. So if we didn't have a Speller Trap to send, obviously you go for Azamina LZ, special itself, you can go into Silvera, then you will search off the Azamina LZ and, you know, do whatever it is you're doing from there. But here we have a Speller Trap we could send. I've already used Thrust, so I send the Thrust off the LZ. We search the Azamina LZ, bring itself out, go into Arciela, send the Deception. Here I'm going to search search a Wanted and a Rusia, so I can shuffle back the Azamina LZ, even though I haven't gotten a single Azamina fusion summon to get back my Hallowed. Now I have another Sinful Spoils in hand. No reason to bring out the Ilia Sylvia. It's so bad card economy. This is why Sol is so great at cracking boards, because the Sol can send something. This is indestructible by battle, so get that out of the way. We can Rusia here. Here we have options. We can go for a Chaos Angel, Light and Dark, go for Diabellze, and that would be, you know, something, but we can do better than that. So here we get the draw off the Wanted. We get rid of the Droplet for Rusia, looking for something better because we don't need Droplet right now. We get a Toy Box, which doesn't matter now because we can't really use it. Here I go into Diabellze, add back Talents because I don't think there's anything else really that I can use at this point. And I bring back out the Sylvie by shuffling back the Arciela. Now we go into the Moon, because we haven't used any of our Fiendsmith cards in this game. So bring out the Lacrima, dump the Engraver, bring out the Engraver, and here we can choose what we want to do. So here I'm going to Engraver, pop, use it, sending the thing so that the defense position monster gets out of the way because we're trying to OTK. Here, again, you can Light and Dark Chaos Angel, but this card, like, not only does it have like a decent attack, but during the standby phase, either player's standby phase, you can target an Azamina or a Sinful Spoils card in a grave, add it to your hand. That's cool because you can add back Azamina LZ, which I shuffled back, but you know, you could get back your Hallowed or whatever. So then we go into the sequence, and then he scoops. Okay, so what are my current thoughts on this deck? There are, I think, like, lots of interesting things you can do with the deck, and I think that the most important thing about this entire deck is actually not so much the engine, it's more adapting your non-engine to the meta that you're playing into. If you're going to an event where you expect a lot of Malice and Ryzeal, I think that these non-engine cards are fine choices, but if you're playing a ton of Rogue or much higher variants at your locals, maybe you should consider playing different types of cards. There are other power spells like Eclipse, for example, that are usually very high value, so you could consider those types of things. You don't have to play the toy cards, but this is the variant that I'm showing today. In the next video, I'm going to show, I think, maybe a version where I'm trying to use Dominus Purge and, Imperm, because you may have heard that what's becoming somewhat popular now is combining hand traps with breakers, so that you can, for example, stop a duo drive and then you have your breaker to deal with the detonator on field or whatever. That means that you have to get rid of some dark monsters in your deck, but that'll be for the next video. So anyhow, if you have any feedback, let me know in the comments or join the Discord, and thanks for watching.